terrible day of the Lord. You can read that in Joel chapter 2, verse 11. The Lord gives voice before his army, for his camp is very great. For strong is the one who executes his word. For the day of the Lord is great and very terrible. Who can endure it? So this is one of many Old Testament passages that help us to understand that the day of the Lord is a day of judgment of the wicked. And Paul says that day will not overtake you like a thief. Paul is making the point that believers are not going to be there at that day. Why aren't they going to be there? The day is not going to overtake them. That day of wrath, of judgment is not going to be upon them. Because Paul has already taught that we are going to be caught up into the air. So we believers will not be there at the second coming of Christ. We won't be on the earth where his judgment will be poured out. Death and destruction, famine and disease, and war. All of these things will be happening. But Paul's point is that you will not be there. Believers will not be there. Because we're not of the darkness. That day will not overtake us. Because we have been caught up into the air. And then if we continue reading down, in verse 9, Paul says, God has not planned, he has not destined us for wrath. Judgment. And so now we can understand from this passage that there are two future events. One, Christ does not return to the earth. He meets the faithful, the believers in the air. He returns to heaven with them. And then a time of judgment follows. And then Christ returns with us, who have been caught up into the air. And he comes back and brings even greater judgment on the earth. And then he will establish his kingdom. And we can learn many things about that kingdom. And the Thessalonians were well informed. They knew the details of that future kingdom. And that's why Paul says, I don't need to write to you about that time. Now I want to talk a little bit about that future kingdom. In Revelation 19, 11 through 16, is where we read about Christ coming on a white horse. The Apostle John, who wrote the book of Revelation, he says, I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. And he who sat on the horse was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he judges and makes war. War on the church, No. We are not appointed for the judgment of God. That day of judgment does not overtake us like a thief. It's a war on the unbelieving. A war on the wicked. And so that judgment's coming. And so it goes on to describe Christ more. Down in 15, it says that a sharp sword will strike the nations. And he will rule them with a rod of iron. And so this day is coming. And so he's going to establish a kingdom for 1,000 years on this earth. You can read about this in Revelation chapter 20. And if we read in verse, let me read here. And I saw thrones. And they sat on them, and judgment was given to them. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus Christ. They had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. And so this is a future time when those who have been faithful to Christ during a great time of judgment, they have not denied Christ. They have not identified with the Antichrist. Many of them have been martyred. And God appoints them to rule with him and with the church that has been resurrected and caught up into the air with Christ. And they rule with him for 1,000 years. You can read about all of these things in the end of the book of Revelation. If you start reading in chapter 19 forward, you will see that during this time Satan has been bound with a chain by an angel. And during this time the earth will become very prosperous. The temple will be reestablished in Israel. Jesus will be sitting upon the physical throne of David, ruling in Jerusalem, ruling with a rod of iron, complete authority over the earth, and the believers will be ruling with him. We will be enforcing his policies of peace upon the earth, and no one will be able to resist him, and no one will be able to resist our administration of his authority. Because these mortal bodies will have put on immortality. This means that our bodies will not be able to physically die. At this time we will become immortal. And so anyone who tries to oppose the authority of Christ and tries to oppose our ruling with him, their efforts will have no effect on us. And we will put down their violent attempts to overthrow Christ. And the glory of God will will be very bright in Jerusalem.
Kitinisa kya ruhanga kireba kiri akero Jerusalem yona.
And his authority will bring peace over this world.
Kandi butokibe buleta businge munsi yona.
And many Gentiles will grab the garment of the Jew.
Kandi dumbi etubanyamahanga bakali buli muntu alekwato akijwaro kya Yesu na kikumwate niyone Yesu bawe nene.
And the prophet Zechariah, he said in chapter 8 verse 23, that 10 men from the nations of every tongue shall take hold of the robe of a Jew, saying, let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. And Isaiah says that they will beat their swords into plowshares. They will beat their spears into pruning hooks. A week ago, I went with Pastor Venancio out on his cocoa farm, and I watched these pruning hooks. And they reached up in the tree and they cut the cocoa free. And so when Isaiah is describing this time of Jesus establishing 1,000 years of authority on the earth, he talks about the swords being made into plowing tools for plowing the dirt and hooks for pruning.
Ate obisaya alenga kusobolola Yesu na atobo kama bwe munsi mwene kumala myaka 10 akazigamba ati empele maserebanga bisaliriyo kukolante siasalira buli kibikyo na bali kikali.
And nation shall not lift up sword against nation,
talebo elitola kulera kuidampele male hanga na kyaliyo,
and they will not learn war anymore.
And
Micah also says the same thing, the prophet Micah. He says almost the exact same words. Because the same spirit that is guiding Isaiah is also guiding Micah. You can read about that in chapter 4 verse 3. Also, if we find in the book of Amos, chapter 9:13, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when the plowman shall not overtake the reaper, and those who smash the grapes to bring out the juice, they will continue their harvesting of the juice during the time that the next planting of seeds has begun. The mountains shall drip sweet wine. That's a description of fresh pressed grape juice. And the hills shall flow with it. So Amos is describing a time of physical prosperity like the world has never seen. And Christ is on the throne of David. And then if we look down at verse 20 of Jeremiah chapter 33, thus says the Lord, if you can break my covenant with the day of my covenant with the night, so that the day and night will not come at their appointed time. Then also my covenant with David, my servant, may be broken. So God is declaring through Jeremiah that if you can stop day and night from happening, then the covenant can also not happen. It's making the point that no one can stop a day and night from happening. And so this agreement that God has of the future events with the church and with Israel, it cannot be deleted. It cannot be stopped. And so I also talked about the temple being rebuilt in Jerusalem. Right now, there's no temple there. The Romans destroyed the temple. They killed 2 million Jews. And the rest of the Jews scattered, the diaspora, the dispersion all over the world. But God is already bringing so many back to Israel. And the bones are coming together. The flesh is upon the bones. The tendons are upon the body. And these bones that were scattered, representing the spiritual death of Israel, they've already come together. But yet there is no spiritual life back into Israel. But there is a remnant. And God is going to bring his people back to him. And they are going to build the temple again in Israel. And you can read that in Zechariah chapter 6, 12 and 13. Now I was talking about motivation. Are we motivated to live a life of faithfulness to God? In view of the reward that he desires to give us, we should desire to live faithful. If we're not motivated by the reward that Christ desires to give us, it means that we don't value the reward. Well, does this honor Christ? In the day of judgment? Not judgment determining salvation, but in judgment of what reward we get. It dishonors him if we don't desire the reward that he desires to give. If you gave your child a gift on their birthday, and they looked at the gift, and there was no joy on their face, and there was no excitement that morning, they see that on the table there's a sheet and it's covering something, and they know that is a gift under the sheet. But they have no interest. And they go outside to play. And you call them in. And you say, today is your birthday. And we purchased something special for you. But the child shows no interest. And then when you open the sheet and you reveal the gift, they look at it and they have no expression on their face. And they go outside to play. This would be painful for you.